welcome to the deep dive. You've brought us a fascinating stack of sources today, taking us back to to the very roots of British rock and roll, right before everything just exploded.
That's right.
We're talking about a true pioneering force, a group whose sound really, it provides a kind of missing link in music history.
Johnny Kidd and the Pirates?
Johnny Kidd and the Pirates.
They were active from, 1959 until Johnny Kidd's tragic death in '66. And if you want a shortcut to understanding how the UK went from, that early novelty rock into the sophisticated beat sound of the mid-'60s, you look right here.
They're the bridge.
They're the sonic and the visual bridge connecting those two eras.
So our mission today is to unpack this huge, yet often overshadowed legacy.
Yeah.
We need to look at the brief, brilliant career of the singer and songwriter Johnny Kidd.
A very prolific songwriter.
And the surprising drama over the band's actual identity, and why the group that continued known just as the Pirates lasted for decades longer than Kidd himself.
It's an incredible story of persistence. And it starts with just massive chart success. They hit the UK charts with Please Don't Touch in 1959.
Right away.
And then, a year later, they cemented their place in history with Shakin' All Over, which was a UK #1 hit. They weren't just playing catch-up, they were really leading the charge.
And crucially, their genre was so fluid. It was rock and roll, it was rhythm and blues, and then what we now call beat.
They moved with the times.
But they also had this astonishing visual component.
Oh.
Long before bands were doing elaborate costume changes, their stage act was incredibly theatrical.
Oh, absolutely. It puts them in this really rare category with people like, say, Streamin' Lord Sutch and the Savages.
They understood performance as a spectacle from the very beginning.
We have to understand where this all came from, though. The man we know as Johnny Kidd, he was actually born Frederick Albert Heath back in 1935.
And like so many British musicians of that era, he didn't start with rock and roll.
No, not at all. He started with skiffle.
Skiffle, the ultimate DIY music genre. For anyone unfamiliar, it's that fascinating 1950s British folk craze. It fused American folk, blues, jazz.
Often played on instruments you could just find around the house.
Right, washboards and tea-chest bass.
Exactly. So Heath was playing guitar in a skiffle group around 1956. First they were called the Frantic Four, and then, hilariously, the Nutter.
The Nutters, I love that.
And what became clear very quickly was that Heath had this undeniable talent for writing. He was just churning out material constantly.
A songwriting machine. He was responsible for most of his own stuff, including the tune that became their big break.
Yeah, in 1959, he and his band signed with his master's Voice. The label, they knew Freddie Heath and the Nutters wasn't exactly going to work in the rock market.
Not quite the right image.
So they rebranded them Johnny Kidd and the Pirates.
And their very first single under that new name, Please Don't Touch, which Kidd wrote, it reached number 25 in 1959.
And this is where Kidd's identity really starts to crystallize. You have to compare him to his contemporaries. I mean, most British rockers at that time were imitating Elvis Presley or Gene Vincent.
Doing these pitch-perfect American rockabilly impressions.
But Kidd wasn't doing that.
Not at all.
Please Don't Touch has this smooth harmony and really zero obvious rockabilly references. Kidd's vocal style was distinctively British.
More like a pop crooner.
Yeah, a polished pop crooner who just happened to be singing rock and roll. He stood out precisely because he wasn't trying to sound American.
Which brings us, of course, to the signature song, the one that defines that entire pre-Beatles era, Shakin' All Over in 1960.
A UK #1 and globally influential. The story behind it is just pure rock and roll mythology. It captures that early, spontaneous energy perfectly.
It was almost an afterthought, wasn't it?
Totally. It was supposed to be the B-side to a cover they were doing of Ricky Nelson's Yes Sir, That's My Baby.
So their biggest hit was going to be hidden on the back of a cover song. That's just wild.
It gets even better. The song was written in a sheer panic the day before the recording session.
No way.
Yeah, Kidd and the band were just hanging out in the basement of the Freight Train coffee bar, trying to scrape together one more piece of material, and Shakin' All Over was born right there.
Talk about capturing lightning in a bottle. Now, the sound of that track, it's instantly recognizable. That iconic, shivering opening guitar riff. Let's just pause on this because it's a brilliant piece of studio ingenuity.
It is absolute genius. And surprisingly, it wasn't the regular Pirates who created it. Kidd and the guitarist Alan Caddy brought in a session player, Joe Moretti, for the track.
They knew they needed something extra.
Exactly. And Moretti was tasked with creating this specific, eerie, almost restless sound.
And how did he do it? It doesn't sound like anything else from 1960.
Well, he literally took an everyday object, the bass player Brian Gregg's cigarette
A
lighter,
lighter.
and used it as a slide. He
Oh.
slid that lighter up and down the fretboard to get that wavering vibrato effect. It gives the track its distinctive nervous tension.
It's the kind of spontaneous innovation that makes early rock so exciting.
Hmm.
And the legacy of that song, I mean, you can't overstate it. A decade later, The Who covered it on Live at Leeds.
Right, and the liner notes made it official. They called the original the UK's best pre-Beatles rock single.
And it had real international legs. I mean, the Guess Who's cover hit #1 in Canada, right?
It did, and it skirted the US Top 20 in 1965. This wasn't just a British hit, it was a blueprint for garage rock all over the world.
Okay, so success is established, but as is so often the case, success leads to instability. After their follow-up single, Please Don't Bring Me Down, failed to chart in 1961, the original Pirates lineup, they were gone.
They literally jumped ship. Clem Cattini, Alan Caddy, Brian Gregg, they all left.
And that departure became a whole other chapter of British music history in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Cattini and Caddy immediately went on to join Joe Meek's backing band, which of course soon evolved into the legendary instrumental group, the Tornadoes.
The ones who did Telstar.
That's them. So even the departing members were foundational figures.
So Kid needed a new crew. And he recruited the lineup that would become, I'd argue, the most influential iteration of the Pirates.
The definitive one, for sure. Johnny Spence on bass, Frank Farley on drums, and critically, Mick Green on lead guitar.
This trio was the engine that powered Kid through that next huge shift in music.
And they were already tight. They'd been playing together, backing a singer named Cuddly Dudley as the Redcaps. So they were professional, confident, ready to go.
Their first major output with Kid, the 1962 single, A Shot of Rhythm and Blues, it broke his dry spell. But more importantly, it featured Mick Green's playing.
And this is where we need to stop and analyze what I called the sonic bridge.
Right.
This single from 1962 is the moment British rock and roll really starts its transition into the British beat era, and it is directly thanks to Mick Green.
Because before this, guitarists played very separate roles, right?
Yeah.
One rhythm, one lead.
Exactly. Green just shattered that convention.
So how did he do it? What was so different about his technique?
He developed this incredible style where he would incorporate alternating lead and rhythm figures simultaneously. He'd be hitting chords, providing the rhythmic backdrop, but then he'd weave in these sharp, cutting lead phrases right in between the downstrokes. It gave the band this huge, dense sound. It suddenly sounded much bigger than a trio.
So a three-piece band guitar, bass, drums could sound like a four-piece. It could cover all that complexity needed for the punchy sound that was just around the corner.
It was revolutionary. I mean, this isn't just trivia. This is foundational technique that influenced guitarists for decades. It gave the beat sound its aggressive urgency.
So while the music was getting more advanced, the visual show was going in the other direction, toward pure theatrical camp.
They committed. They really did.
Tell us about the full pirate aesthetic.
They dressed in full, anachronistic 19th century pirate costumes. They played in front of a galleon backdrop.
And Kid himself.
He was the ringleader. He wore an eye patch. He'd toy with a cutlass. And he would do these high-kicking moves in time with the music.
It sounds totally ridiculous.
And totally compelling. This whole dress-up band aesthetic was truly pioneering. We often credit groups like Paul Revere and the Raiders or Alice Cooper with that kind of thing.
But Kid and the Pirates were doing this in 62, 63.
Exactly. They injected that theatricality into British rock just as the music was becoming, a bit more serious.
And even as the Beatles and Mersey Beat just exploded around them, they were still relevant. They still had hits.
They did. In 1963, they scored two more big ones, both written by Gordon Mills, I'll Never Get Over You at number 4, and Hungry for Love at number 20.
And their confidence as a trio at this point was just soaring.
So much so that they briefly experimented with trying to launch the Pirates as a standalone act, separate from Kid. They recorded a Pirates-only single with Johnny Spence on vocals.
And the anecdote here just shows how incredibly tight they were.
Oh, absolutely. Both sides of that single, My Babe and Casting My Spell, were recorded in one take each.
One take.
Think about that. No overdubs, no fixes. Just raw, powerful, spontaneous rock and roll captured perfectly in a single pass.
Unfortunately, the public wasn't quite ready for the Pirates without Johnny Kidd. That single failed to chart, which put a stop to that brand split, for a while anyway.
And then the hits began to tail off in 1964. An organist, Vic Cooper, joined to expand the sound, but the momentum was just it was gone.
And this is where the tragedy of the near miss really starts to set in.
Yeah.
Our sources say this expanded lineup had recorded a long-awaited debut album.
Which was never mastered for release.
A huge loss.
A profound loss to music history. The industry was shifting so fast, EMI was just inundated with successful acts. And when their single Always and Ever failed to make the top 40, the decision was pretty much made to just shelve the album.
And soon after, the linchpin left. Mick Green departed in the summer of '64 to join Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas.
Which brings us to the critical decision that secured the Pirates' future. Eventually, that core trio of Spence and Farley with a new guitarist parted company with Kid entirely.
But they kept the name.
They continued as the Pirates, having retained the name.
This is that legal drama we mentioned. How did the backing band manage to keep the name over the star?
Well, it came down to the relationship Kid structured with his musicians. Johnny Spence has confirmed that Kid always employed them as session men.
So they were paid for their services, but they didn't have a stake in the name Johnny Kidd and the Pirates.
Exactly. So why did Kid let them keep the Pirates part?
It seems incredibly generous.
It was strategic. Kid was looking to move to a solo career, he wanted to focus on R&B and soul, and he needed a clear distinction. So the naming of the Pirates as a separate entity was, and I quote, wholly endorsed by Kid himself.
So they could tour the old rock and roll material, and that would clear the path for him to relaunch his own sound.
Precisely. Kid then formed another backing band, his last one, which was consequently billed as the New Pirates.
And this lineup included a young bassist named Nick Simper.
And Roger Truth on drums. By all accounts, Kid was revitalized. He was working toward that R&B and soul comeback.
And that's where the story just takes its most tragic turn. Kid was right on the cusp of this new chapter, but on October 8th, 1966, returning from a canceled gig, he was killed instantly in a head-on car accident.
He was only 30 years old.
That accident also involved Nick Simper, the bassist. He thankfully survived, though he was injured. And it's just a sad footnote that Simper would later go on to co-found Deep Purple.
It just shows how close Kid was to having yet another legendary musician in his lineup.
His final single, Send for That Girl, was released posthumously, but it failed to chart. And the New Pirates carried on briefly as a tribute, but because of that prior agreement.
The story of the Pirates was far from finished.
Which brings us to their lasting life. The definitive, best-known lineup, Green, Spence, and Farley, the only one authorized to record under the name, reformed in 1976.
And the timing was just perfect. In the late 70s, you had the explosion of the pub rock scene, early punk.
Which all celebrated raw, stripped-down rock and roll.
Right, over the excesses of prog rock. The Pirates fit right into that ethos. They weren't a nostalgia act. They were raw rock and roll veterans.
And they had real commercial success, releasing 4 albums. Their 1977 album, Out of Their Skulls, even reached number 57 on the UK albums chart.
What's fascinating about their endurance is how they bridged generations. They were featured on the Hope and Anchor Front Row Festival compilation in '78, charting right alongside emerging punk and new wave bands.
Their classic sound was suddenly relevant again.
To a new, younger audience looking for authenticity.
That trio continued performing all the way until 2005, when Frank Farley retired. And the authorized Pirates finally dissolved when Mick Green died in 2010.
But the influence keeps rippling out. Johnny Spence is still touring and recording, particularly with a Finnish trio, Doctor's Order.
And the cross-pollination across British music is just astonishingly tight. Other former Pirates formed the Spellcasters in 2013, playing new versions of tracks Mick Green had co-written with Wilco Johnson.
Of Dr. Feelgood.
Speaking of Dr. Feelgood.
A phenomenal detail of the legacy. That band took their name directly from Johnny Kidd and the Pirates.
From a 1964 B-side cover of Dr. Feelgood. And it's worth noting the name of that song is slang for heroin.
They picked up an obscure B-side from a failed period of Kidd's career and built a hugely successful band around the name. It just proves that even the deep cuts from this group are influential.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Johnny Kidd and the Pirates were essential. Kidd was one of the few pre-Beatles British rockers to achieve massive fame with a singular, non-imitative vocal style. He didn't sound like anyone else.
And the enduring power of that Mick Green, Johnny Spence, and Frank Farley trio gave us that crucial sonic bridge, moving British music from clumsy imitation to the aggressive, sophisticated sound of the British beat era.
They laid the visual and musical groundwork for decades of rock that followed. But here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Kidd's tragic death in 1966 cut short a potential career resurgence focused on R&B and soul. We know that just before his death, He had recorded an unreleased version of Otis Redding's I Can't Turn You Loose.
Wow. That track title alone suggests a radical shift in direction.
Indeed. We know the Authorized Pirates continued for decades in the rock and roll vein, but what if the original rock and roll pirate had lived to successfully complete his switch to raw soul and R&B?
Competing with the sounds coming out of Motown and Stax.
How might the course of British rock history, which was just heading into psychedelia, have fundamentally changed?
Yeah.
What might those new pirate soul sounds have done to the late 60s musical landscape?
That's a profound what if. An unreleased album, an unreleased R&B track. We missed out on a whole other chapter of British musical greatness.
We'll leave you with that possibility, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the stories behind the sound.